tell you anxiety rules my life? Anxiety rules my life. And the reason I'm talking about this is because about 2 weeks ago, we were driving to work and I was having anxiety because we were going to be late. And of course, there was traffic on the highway and there was nothing you can do about traffic. But it was the anxiousness and the nervousness I was feeling about being late because I had never been late and I'm never late and I'm either always on time or I'm early. So I texted my boss and I said, hey, just let you know, we're stuck in traffic. We're going to be like a few minutes late. And they were like, it's okay. Like, thanks for letting us know. But it was crazy the feelings I was having. And then the next week, so that was 2 weeks ago. And then last week, I drove home while it was raining. And I was gripping the steering wheel so hard. And my anxiety was so high because, for one, my car and windshield wipers aren't great for the rain. And it was raining really, really hard. And I'm the type of person who, like, snow doesn't bother me as much. But, like, rain, I am for some reason terrified of driving in the rain. So we were driving home and I could feel the anxiousness coming and I'm gripping the steering wheel. And when I got home, like, my hands hurt from squeezing onto the steering wheel so hard. And it was at that moment I realized how much my anxiety controls my life, how much I let it just ruin things or take control of things that it shouldn't take control of. And I started to think back of, like, middle school and high school and throughout my life, and, like, all of these things I let anxiety hold me back from. And there was the big thing of when I looked up anxiety and what it was about, and when I did the episode about it, it was one of those things where the shakiness and the heart beating, the sweaty palms, the nervousness, like, I could associate with all of those things. And I was thinking back about one time in high school, I was getting into it with one of my friends and the girl he was interested in. And I remember going into a meeting and talking to, like, the deans and a lady about what was going on and how we could fix it, and my leg was shaking. And I remember just my heart beating so fast and just feeling so anxious and nervous about what was going on. And I remember the lady asking me if I was okay and if I needed a drink or all this stuff. And I was like, oh no, I'm fine. Like, I'm just really upset. And the more I think about it, I'm just like, these signs that started happening around things that make me anxious, like, are my reminder of, like, you are letting this control how you're living your life. And over time, I've thought of all the things that, like, has held me back from following dreams or goals because I've been so anxious. Like, when I started my last podcast, I was anxious about, like, feeling the way I felt and about being motivational and telling people things, because at that time I was suffering from depression really bad, and then with my anxiety associating with my depression and all that, it was really hard to be motivational. But, like, I started this podcast, my last podcast, on, like, this big, like, I'm gonna do this, and then I realized, like, going so many episodes in, that, like, this just wasn't what I need to do. So when I took a step back from that, I was like, how can I share my stories? How can I tell people how I'm feeling? And that's why I started this podcast around mental health, because I associate with that. Like, I suffer from depression and I'm suffering from anxiety, and I know how it feels to have those anxious feelings. And I know how it feels to be so scared that it holds you back from the things that you want to do. Being scared and having anxiety almost held me back from starting this podcast. And there are some days when I think, like, I feel like there's no point, like, nobody's listening to me and this isn't reaching the people I want to reach. And, like, I have to get out of my own head, because when I let those anxious feelings happen, and when I have the leg shaking and my palms get sweaty and like I can just feel my heart beating, like I almost have to like start to breathe and calm myself down, because if I don't, then I'm never going to accomplish the things that I want to accomplish. I would never keep pressing play on this podcast every week, and I would never keep recording episodes and having the confidence in myself to keep going, even when the future is unknown, even if people don't listen to me, and even if the only people listening to me are my family. Like, if I let that drive my life, I will never be able to fully live the life I want to live. And it was just funny for me to have that realization in the car when we were on our way to work, and telling my fiance how anxious I was driving in the rain. Like, it affects me that bad. And seriously, when I'm telling you, my hands hurt so bad from just like gripping the steering wheel, because I was so anxious to just like, all of these negative thoughts were going through my head of like all the things that bad could happen. My car spinning out, crashing, not being able to stop, like all these things that probably would never happen. But my anxiety made me like go on overdrive. And I think that's how a lot of people feel with anxiety, is that once you're anxious about something, it makes you very scared, and it makes you upset, and it makes your emotions go haywire, and then you can't stop thinking about it, and you start thinking about all of these like things that could happen that, like, for some of us, or for most of us, like, these things will never happen to us. But it's the way our brain thinks. It's the way our brain is wired. It's the way our brain goes on overdrive, thinking of just like all these things that are going to happen that are not going to happen for us. And when I think about growing up and just like all the moments I can now realize that like my anxiety was on high and on overdrive, it's just like, it's like, wow, it all makes sense. Like, I can remember, everybody probably has to take like a speech class in high school, and it was the day that I had to do my speech, and like I had planned it out, I had practiced my speech, I'm like, I am going to nail this, but like I was so anxious. And one of the things that like I think of now is like, I would love to be able to one day be a speaker at an event for mental health and just like speak out my truth and be able to help people. But like during that time in high school when I had to give that speech, like I was just so scared and I was so nervous. And like when I tell you I nailed it and I did so good and I got an A on that speech, like now when I look back, it was so silly. But when I think about it now, I'm like, if I got to the point in my life where somebody offered me a spot at like a speaking event, or to help people and speak out about mental health, like, would I be able to do it? Would my anxiety hold me back? Would my anxiety make me feel scared? Would my anxiety tell me that I'm not good enough and I don't know enough and people aren't going to associate with me and what I'm going to say is not going to help them? Like, what is that going to feel like? And I think that with working on my mental health, one of the big things I need to start focusing on is my anxiety and the way it makes me feel and how anxious it makes me feel. Like, feeling that anxiousness about being late to work when there was nothing I can do, like, it shifts my moods and it makes me cranky and angry, and I can't let that happen. I need to find ways to, like, do a breathing routine, or maybe just journal how I'm feeling in the moment, or writing in my phone. And there's so many things that like I need to start associating to do to make myself not so anxious. But I just like wanted to share that with you guys, because recently we're changing my podcast from Depression What's Your Deal to Mindful Thoughts. I also changed my Confessions of Depression of Confessions of Mental Health, because it's important for me, I feel, to share the things in my confessions about what I'm going through with mental health, because this could have somebody else who would see this and connect to it and be like, oh my gosh, like I know that feeling. And I know the feelings of being so anxious about something that's going to happen or something that's going on in your life, and it holds you back from what you want to do and those dreams and those goals you've set for yourself, because your mind just plays tricks on you. And I think that's something that anybody with mental health really struggles with, is the pain of feeling like you're never good enough, or what you do isn't good enough, or what you produce, nobody's going to, read that book, no one's going to listen to that podcast, no one's going to watch you on YouTube. Like, for me, these are the things that like come up for me with all the things that I'm doing. But if I let that keep controlling my life, I will never go for anything. So if you're somebody who you feel anxious about things and you're nervous about things, like maybe you're starting a new job and you're anxious about starting a new job, will people like me? Will I be able to do the job good enough? Will I be able to, have conversations with people? I think we just get in our own heads and we make ourselves just more anxious than we should be. Like, don't think that way. You got to think positively. And that's another thing I think I definitely associate with being anxious, is like all the negative things that are going to happen that really probably aren't going to happen. But because I made myself so anxious about it, I'm like, man, these things are going to happen. I know they will, when in reality, they won't. Because something else that also gives me very high anxiety is uncomfortable conversations. And if you've listened to my podcast, you might think that is funny, because I talk about topics and mental health illnesses that are very uncomfortable for people to talk about. And I just talk about it because I'm learning and it just feels natural for me to share them. Or for some people, you could be like, you're uncomfortable in some conversations, but you'll talk about certain things on episodes and you're fine with that, which is, it is funny to think about. But depending on the conversations you're going to have, when you know you're about to have a very difficult conversation with somebody and you know it's going to be uncomfortable, you could have like high anxiety because you don't know how they're going to react, you don't know how it's going to go, you don't know how they're going to feel. This was something that happened to me and my fiance when we went in to our old job to tell them we were quitting. Our anxiety was so high, and it was that like gut feeling and feeling sick and just feeling overwhelmed, because like you just don't know how the other people are going to react. And sometimes when you feel that way, you won't have those uncomfortable conversations because you just don't want to step on people's toes, and you just don't want people to feel uncomfortable, and you don't want them to overact, and you don't want them to get upset, so you sometimes just don't have them. But if you learn that if you always hold back and never truly tell people how you feel, like some people will walk all over you. And when I tell you we went and had that conversation, and when I walked out, it was like a sigh of relief. It was like, like I can breathe now, like it's over, like I'm not anxious about it anymore, I don't have to worry about it anymore. And a lot of times that holds me back from telling people like how I feel or what I'm going through, because like I'm so anxious about how they're going to feel or how they're going to react. And over the like last few years, it's held me back on saying like a lot of the ways I felt at my old job, and like the way things were going. And like if I said something, were you going to like take that and pin that against me? And I didn't want to feel that way. So with just looking back on everything that's happened so far leading up to today, talking about this, it's just so crazy of how over the years I've really let anxiety just like run my life and run the way I feel, and overtake the conversations that I should have had, and just a lot of the things I've gone through and I've dealt with. Because if you have anxiety, you know exactly what I'm saying and how I feel. It's just like that pit in your stomach, and it makes you sick, and you're just, it just seems so much, and it's too much, and it's like, I don't want to do that. I am not putting myself in those situations, so forget it. and we walk away and we don't do the things or say the things we need to do. And just with thinking more about it, I personally need to work on my anxiety more, and I just wanted to share with you guys how I was feeling and how relevant this is for me right now in my life, because it was really just one of those things that like dawned on me and was like, oh my gosh, like, wow, like this is so wild how something so little could make my anxiety like skyrocket. And when I know that my anxiety is really bad, it's because my heart flutters and I get very shaky, and then like I'm nervous, and like I can just like I am very in tune with my body and feeling like I know when it's coming on and I know what it feels like. And for a lot of people, and please do go back to the anxiety episode and listen through that, because you might not realize that like how you're feeling and what you're feeling is anxiety, and it could be controlling a lot of decisions you make in your life. Because when your anxiety is controlling your decisions and controlling how you feel, then like I said, there's a lot of things you're going to hold back on and you're not going to say and you're not going to do because you're scared and you're nervous, and you just don't want to be in those situations and in those uncomfortable conversations, so you just don't do it. So I think my advice for me and for everybody else is to find the things that work for you and find the things that calm you down. If it's essential oils, if it's meditation, if it's writing how you're feeling in the moment, and find ways to overcome them. For me, I have realized that like I just have to relax, and I have to tell myself that everything's going to be okay, and everything that is happening and it's meant to happen. And for a lot of people this might not connect with you, but for me, I have turned to God and kind of just been like, you know what, if this is what you want me to do and how you want me to feel, then this is what is going to happen. And journaling for me is a big thing, because it just helps me not with just my depression, but with my anxiety, for writing down how I'm feeling and how everything is going and how I want to feel. And it just allows me to really get everything out. And for some people, if journaling doesn't help, maybe doing video diaries is something. Like if you're feeling a certain way or you're going through something, sitting down and just talking to yourself about it and trying to just get it all out can make you feel so much better. Feel like you're anxious about a meeting or a conversation or going somewhere, like you could sit down with yourself, put a camera on you, and just talk through why it's making you feel this way, or what is making you feel this way, and what can you do to make yourself not feel this way. Like what are the steps in motion you can make, that you can put in to make yourself feel better, so you're not as anxious when you're going to go do whatever you're going to do. Another thing that made me feel really anxious was driving alone. Like I hated driving alone. It just made me feel so anxious. So when I'm driving, I put a podcast on or I put music on, like something to distract my mind, because the more that my mind is in a place where I just keep thinking about the situation or what's going on, the more anxious I get. So I just wanted to share that with you guys today. That is my confession of mental health, is that sometimes I just really let my anxiety rule my life, and I have to learn to not do that. So this episode was definitely more of a ramble, but I like doing confessions of my mental health because it helps put clarity out there for me, but could help somebody else who listens to it and they're like, oh my gosh, yep, that's totally me. Like I am connecting with you on another level. So if you connect with this and you're like, yes, this is me, please go over and leave a comment on the YouTube channel or come over to Instagram and just let me know that you definitely connected with this and can associate it with it, because I think for a lot of us, when we know other people can associate with you and we know that we're not alone with anything we struggle with, it's easier for us to cope with it, and it's easier to find ways to feel better and ways to live with whatever we have to live with. So yeah, that is my confession of mental health surrounding anxiety. Thank you so much for listening to another episode. You know what would be so cool? If you guys could share, like, comment my episodes. It is so helpful to know what you guys like and what you guys want to hear, and it'll help my podcast get out there more if you're liking it and sharing it so other people can come by and also be able to hear episodes that might help them too. So I'll talk to you guys in the next episode. Bye!